Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Zzzax of Live, a Marvel podcast from Laughing Place. I think I'm getting better with the timing of going from that countdown into our theme song.
That was seamless, Frankie.
I'm Mike Mack. Back with me is Kyle Burbank.
Hello.
So, I mean, you
saw
were
this
there,
one.
So, yeah. Last time Kyle didn't get to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yet. What did you think of Volume 3, Kyle?
Still didn't see it, Mac. I don't know why. There's not a good excuse. I think it's because, at a certain point, now that we know that stuff pops up on Disney Plus, it's like, well, why would I make the effort now? Surprisingly, I've seen maybe allusions to spoilers, but I seriously don't know what happens in the movie. So I've stayed clean even after 3 or 4 weeks now. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I'll just wait for, and I might have missed Spider-Verse, except I saw that the reviews posted and you said you were going to go do a review. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's going to go to a press screening. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Tomorrow's Thursday. When does this movie come out? Oh, look, I have tickets for tomorrow night. The decision's made for me.
There you go. Yeah, so we are going to be discussing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in this episode. This is interesting because this is our first non-MCU project we're going to be discussing, aside from, in our drafts and things like that. But
and with the I wouldn't call Assembled part of the MCU, but they're about MCU films. But yes, I think this is our first venture into the Spider-Verse officially.
We have a response, actually, a thought from All in the Game. People are too conditioned to wait 3 months for Disney Plus.
That's me.
I will say, when it's not Marvel related, I tend to find myself doing that as well. Hence The Little Mermaid and the fact that I haven't seen that yet. But we both did see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in theaters, and we will be discussing that in detail with spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie yet, what we'll do is we'll have a banner up on the screen if you're watching the video. We are live right now. But if you're listening, hopefully by now you've seen the movie. You've seen, at least in the title of this episode, that we're going to be talking about the movie. So I think you figured that out. But first, let's talk about some Marvel news. Let's get caught up here. And I wanted to start off actually with something that, Kyle, you've been more on top of than I have, because this just broke minutes ago. What's going on with Apple?
So today, Apple did a presentation and they announced the Apple Vision Pro, which is not necessarily VR, it's an AR headset. And it's funny because there was a lot of rumors that this was going to happen. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney was a part of this. And sure enough, Bob Iger popped up on stage. And the only thing they concretely announced was that Disney Plus will be available for this new system when it launches early next year. But they did a video kind of teasing the other possibilities of how Disney and this device could team up. And one of the things was a what if featured thing where it shows the logo and then it had the watcher like in your living room, and then you kind of like reach out your hand and he put like a bangle on you. And so that part was interesting. They also, as far as outside of Marvel, they showed like the idea of having Walt Disney World stuff pop up. So you have like a little mini electrical parade go by and the castle. Mickey Mouse kind of coming alive from a poster and interacting around your room, things like that. Like I said, they didn't really go into details about what those experiences might be, but Disney Plus, as far as you'll be able to watch Disney Plus and use the features they showed, where you can basically have, Disney Plus and have the movie play in your living room or whatever size screen you want to have because you're wearing these goggles. It seems kind of cool. It's obviously part gimmicky, part practical. I think they did a decent job talking about Apple presenting the practicalities of such a thing, but the fact that it's going to start at $3,500 makes it a little bit harder.
I was going to bring up All in the Game comment. Not exactly cheap though, right?
Yeah.
$3,500 is, I would say, a little bit too steep for me, but it's a bit too steep for me. So I will probably sit that one out. How do you feel about the whole AR? I mean, you just went through the presentation and how it, the practical effects and things, but how do you feel about AR and as an entertainment, medium?
I think AR is more interesting to me than VR. I like the augmented, for those who don't know, AR, augmented reality versus virtual reality. So it's not completely the Oasis like in Ready Player One. you do still have, that real life element. I think it's kind of cool. They did, you feel like Tony Stark, like you're going to be able to like throw the things off of your
Yeah.
your screen and your vision and pick things up and interact with them in the space. So, I mean, it's definitely cool, and I do think that this is better than some of the other stuff I've seen. But I think it's going to be. I mean, to be fair, it's also kind of what Apple traffics in, is kind of fitting these niche professionals. Like I could see graphic designers and people like that benefiting more from this than just schmoes like us that think it'll be cool to watch a movie on whatever side of the screen, or watch it while you're on the top of have a mountain background and have the movie just kind of floating above a lake. But I did think it was interesting that they focused specifically on What If for this, because I feel like that one was kind of an underrated. I'm glad it's still on the platform, honestly.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of cool that it had this pretty significant feature inside of this Disney presentation that was part of a much larger presentation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I will probably sit this one out. I'm interested to see what people think about it once the product does release. Which, do we know when that is releasing?
Early next year is what they said. They didn't give us an exact date, but yeah, they talked about it for like 40 minutes. So I'm sure a lot more will be coming out about it. But it was cool to see Disney up there, and as Iger said, he's like combining the best storytelling company with the best, most innovative technology company is the way he sees it. And they're not merging, despite what people assume. But this will not
yet
halt those rumors as we look at the stock price.
Right. All right, so let's jump into some other Marvel news here real quick. Loki season 2, we have a date. October 6th is when Loki will debut. All we really know about season 2 so far is that obviously we're picking up, continuing the story from season 1, but we had that post-credit scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So, and I believe that is lifted right from the series.
It definitely was edited as such.
Yeah. So we'll be keeping an eye on any more news for Loki. I'm sure we'll get a trailer not too far from now. So looking forward to that. Again, October 6th for Loki season 2. And then Echo will debut November 29th. This one's interesting because all of the episodes for Echo, I don't think they told us how many, but they said all episodes on November 29th. So that's different. That's something we haven't seen for an MCU project yet. What do you think?
It's kind of weird. I don't love it. I guess I don't mind it as much. Like I know some people are really, it's kind of funny. People are like, oh, I hate when they do this. And then they'll sit and watch all of them. I'm like, well, you didn't have to, you could still space it out. I guess, right. I think it's going to be harder with, so Muppets Mayhem was the last one they did it with. Right. And for that, it was more,
as far as I know, at least there might have been something since.
Yeah. For that, we just didn't see it as like a sign of confidence. For me, at least, that's why it was more like, oh, that's disappointing that they're doing that. But for this, I think the concern is because Marvel fans are spoiler averse. You're like, oh, do I have to sit here and watch, let's say it's 8 episodes, watch 8 hours of television on that day to avoid being spoiled? Like that's kind of where the concern comes in. As far as like, if there was nothing to really spoil, then yeah, I can take it at my own pace, do it once a week like I would any other show. And as far as the vote of confidence thing, I don't know if that's still a stigma with Disney Plus, just because they started to do it more. I don't know what to think of it.
Yeah, I don't know that there was any confidence to be had. I feel like Echo was always set for one season. Maybe the character moves on to other projects in the future, but I don't think I expected multiple seasons of Echo. I mean, we've already seen one season of WandaVision and one season of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And, these are bigger characters with, quite frankly, bigger roles in the Marvel Universe. So I didn't expect to see much more of Echo. I do think, though, that there is going to be at least something to be spoiled when you have, we don't know a ton about the series, but we do know that Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are going to be in it, reprising their roles as Daredevil and the Kingpin, respectively. And, then we have Daredevil Born Again in the future. So you figure there's probably going to be some connection to be made there. And so, yeah, I am fully anticipating waking up on November 29th and watching 8 straight hours of television one way or another. And if I'm being honest, I'm not totally opposed to it. I'm kind of looking forward to it. And that's assuming it's 8 1-hour episodes. We don't really know exactly the numbers just yet, but we'll see what it is. But yeah, I'm still looking forward to Echo. I think it should be a really good series. I think Alaqua Cox did an awesome job in Hawkeye. I think the character is fascinating, so I'm looking forward to that for sure.
All the game is correct. American Born Chinese, I think, came out a week or two after Muppets, and those were all episodes. So yeah, it might just be a new thing that they're trying. I mean, Disney Plus, as we kind of alluded to, is going through a lot of changes and growing pains at the moment. So it could be just something, if it worked for Netflix. Yeah, I was just thinking, oh man, I bet you they're not going to do the Daredevil one, all 18 episodes at once. Who could imagine that? And I'm like, oh wait, that's the way it was when it was around the first run.
Yeah, well, that was I think 9 episodes were those seasons. I think this one is going to be 16 episodes, is what they said. 16 or 18. Maybe it was 18. Either way, it's a lot. It's too many to watch in one day, put it that way. Also want to say hi to Alexander. But yeah, so speaking of Daredevil Born Again, we also got some news today. We don't have a schedule for San Diego Comic-Con just yet. It's coming up at the end of July. But Vincent D'Onofrio, who I mentioned plays Wilson Fisk and the Kingpin / the Kingpin, did say, he assures fans that they will be there in San Diego for Comic-Con. So, and they were just at Philly Fan Expo, I believe was the name of the event, talking about Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox. So he is confident that they will be there. We expected Marvel to have some sort of presence at San Diego Comic-Con. Not sure how big it will be, but
I suppose if they can go to Philly Fan Fest, they can make their way to San Diego.
Yeah, well, I'm curious about, because I don't think that it wasn't like, I don't think Kevin Feige was there. I think it was Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox, which the actors can make appearances at cons all over the country at any time. You see it all the time, actually. But I'd be expecting this to be more of a Hall H type thing, and they have a role to play in that, as opposed to it being like, hey, come and chat with Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox. So again, we don't have a full schedule for that just yet, but thought that was interesting.
I think it'll kind of potentially, I think the writer's strike could play a role in Marvel's presence there. But yeah, I think they could, if Disney scales it down, they won't be the only ones. So you might see these more informal kind of ones that you wouldn't expect from San Diego Comic-Con, but are very common at other like Reed Pop events and stuff like that. More just like spotlights, like have these two people come answer questions from fans and not really have a bunch of big announcements that they can make, but just support and and hang out.
So, I mean, you set me up, because the writer's strike is the next thing I wanted to talk about, because Thunderbolts has been not delayed, but they have halted production on Thunderbolts. So you would expect there probably will be a delay at some point, depending on how much longer the writer's strike goes on for. So, this is the kind of news that we've been seeing a lot of lately with this writer's strike. And again, we don't know how long it'll go on for, so we might be seeing some more of it in the near future. I did see, I believe it was Deadpool began production despite the writer's strike anyway. So that is pretty interesting. So we'll see how that goes. In some more positive news, did you happen to see the video of Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau having a conversation 15 years after the release of Iron Man?
I did. Yeah, we watched that either maybe last weekend or the weekend before that. We sat down and watched that with our breakfast. I enjoyed it. I mean, I wish it was even longer, but I thought it was an interesting conversation. And I thought it was interesting that they talked, someone was almost cast in a different movie, like RDJ for like Fantastic Four.
Yeah, well, this was Jon Favreau was talking about, Kevin Feige has said that their first choice for for Iron Man for Tony Stark was Clive Owen, and he turned it down. And so they had already been in contact, or Kevin Feige had already been in contact with Robert Downey Jr. in the past, because he wanted him to play Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four movie. And so that's what brought Robert Downey Jr. in for that role, which, I mean, imagine just how different the MCU could have been, just if any one of those details changed. Another story I thought was interesting from this video, which this video is like 20 plus minutes. So it's a very interesting conversation. And you're right, I did feel like it could have been longer. Those two could have talked forever. But Feige tells a story about how him and Jon Favreau and several of the other people involved in the making of Iron Man were going around to early screenings and sort of like welcoming guests to watch the movie. And after years later, when they were making Black Panther, Ryan Coogler came up to Kevin Feige and said, "Hey, I was in one of those screenings. I was sitting in the back. I was in college at the time."
Yeah, the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood.
There you go. Yeah. So it was just really cool to that's that story. They're kicking off the MCU, and one of your future directors is in the audience watching you introduce it. So that was a really cool story.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting hearing Kevin talk about creating those like cheer moments. Like, oh, we added the cheesy thing where he says "my turn," and that gets like a big reaction from the crowd. It's so cool that he like can think of those sort of things, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of on the other end where they're talking about figuring out Iron Man's last line. Like he always has a quip. Why doesn't he say a quip? And then of course it's "I am Iron Man." So I just thought that was interesting to think of like how much that might not have, that wasn't on the page, they added it after the fact and it works so perfectly. It's not the most like memorable moment that comes to mind, but it works in the moment when you're watching it in a theater and stuff.
Another cool point from it too is Jon Favreau was like, you wanted me to get these cheer moments and I don't know how to do that, so instead I was going for the laugh, and so he played up the humor a little bit more, and that kind of created the Marvel formula for the MCU. So it's just funny how those things just worked out. We have a few pieces of casting news / directorial news, I guess. Clark Johnson, who directed episodes of Luke Cage and Alaska Daily, is set to recur in Daredevil Born Again and to direct a few episodes of it as well. So I'm not super familiar. I mean, I watched Luke Cage. I'm not sure specifically which episodes he directed, so I couldn't really tell you, but cool to see some more additions to the cast and, adding a director to the list as well. For Deadpool 3, Brianna Hildebrand and Shioli Kutsuna are returning to play Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio. You haven't seen Deadpool 2, correct?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the bits between those two and Wade, of course, are hilarious in that movie. So which we might talk about later on a little bit more. But yeah, so those two coming back. Basically, the entire cast of the previous two Deadpool films are back for Deadpool 3, which I think is absolutely awesome. Those movies were so great, so I think they are doing a great job here. In animated casting news, Edward James Olmos is going to be voicing Molecule Man in the season 2 of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur on Disney Channel. I have to catch up on that show. I'm a few episodes.
I haven't watched any yet. I keep meaning to.
It is really good, and you'll have the theme song stuck in your head for weeks afterwards. So, I definitely need to do some catching up on that. I love the inclusion of Molecule Man for season 2. He's a pretty different than
Particle Man. That's a They Might Be Giant song. This is Molecule Man.
Molecule Man.
We'll talk to Mike Celestino about Particle Man.
Yeah, there you go. But Molecule Man is a pretty heavy hitter as far as villains are concerned, so I'm interested to see him interact with Lunella. We have a question here. Is there going to be another Spider-Man 4 movie yet? Which actually, I'll jump ahead a little bit and talk about some of this other news here. We had some news from Sony, which we're going to be talking quite a bit about this episode. Is it Amy Pascal is the example? Yeah, Amy Pascal. So she
former head of Sony who got ousted around the time of the leak, the hack.
Right. Okay. So in a recent interview, she was saying that they have some future plans for some live action Spider-Man movies, including a live action Miles Morales movie, which I'd be really excited to see. The long reported / rumored Spider-Woman movie, which Olivia Wilde was attached to, and I can't even remember. This was a long running story on this movie, but so that is apparently still happening. She did also say that a 4th Tom Holland Spider-Man movie will be happening. That one, I believe, would be the only one in conjunction with the MCU, with Marvel Studios, I should say. But who knows? I mean, I don't know. We're going to talk about Spider-Verse, and that it just opens a lot of doors. Elsewhere in the Sony Spider-Verse, Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is known for playing Baron Mordo in Doctor Strange, as well as, I mean, he's just a fantastic actor. He's been in a lot of things, but has been cast in Venom 3. So interesting. They're gonna make me see Venom 3, I guess. I just want to know that, you know, they're hiding who he's playing in Venom 3 because he's going to end up playing Baron Mordo and it's actually going to connect to the MCU. That would be really interesting, but he's a fantastic actor. The cast of that movie is shaping up to look pretty good. So, you know, they're going to make me buy in again. It's going to happen.
I think he's reprising his role from Kinky Boots.
That would be quite a deep cut, I guess. Be a very interesting crossover. But yeah, so he will be in Venom 3. A couple of other little quick pieces of news. First, did you happen to see, speaking of Sony Spider-Man, did you happen to see the gameplay from Spider-Man 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2?
I have not.
Okay, so they released, I want to say it was like a 15-minute video, something like that, of the gameplay. This game looks unbelievable. The first one was incredible. I'm currently playing the Miles Morales one finally, and this second one just looks incredible. I can't wait to it's going to be the thing that makes me buy a PlayStation 5. So that gives you an idea of how good it is. Yeah, I highly recommend checking out the video because it just looks so good. You get to play as Peter Parker in the symbiote suit, and you get to change back and forth mid-action. Get to change back and forth between Miles and Peter mid-action. So that, I mean, that's just really awesome. It looks so good. Last thing I want to talk about before we get into Spider-Verse, and a nice segue here. We do have a video on the Laughing Place YouTube channel now. I got to check out some Across the Spider-Verse toys from Hasbro. Of course, some Marvel Legend series figures like that Spider-Man 2099. There's Miles Morales, of course, and then Gwen Stacy, and then another series of figures that are more, you know, geared towards a younger audience, more for playing, and then a really fun Spider-Punk Web Blast guitar that shoots webs. So if you want to watch me look stupid trying to play with a child's toy and not quite being able to figure it out, you can check that out on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. And that brings us to our conversation about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I was a little disappointed. I thought that was going to be one of the hoods with the eye holes.
No, that would have been cool.
But Kyle is wearing Our Universe. Do they say Ghost Spider or do they say Spider Gwen?
That's a good question. I think it said Spider Gwen, and it's actually her universe, as I found out, because it's actually a crop hoodie, so it's a little short on me. But I like it. It's got thumb holes, which I appreciate. Nice. The zipper leaves something to be desired. But I do love that you can go all the way up and it's still got the hood on the outside. Like that kind of like layering makes it not only look more like hers, but also it's just kind of unique.
Yeah, it looks great from this angle. Maybe just don't stand all the way up so you see the crop. But
like I said, I got a medium, so luckily it's not too short on me. It's not like above my navel or anything. But I was just like, oh, and there's not pockets on the front. That's another.
Okay, all right. But it does look really cool. Like the color scheme for Ghost Spider is awesome. So this is great audio for the podcast listeners, by the way. All right, let's get into our conversation about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. The banner is up. So as long as this banner is up, if you are watching the video, if you have not seen the movie yet, as long as this banner is up, you can go ahead and mute us if you don't want spoilers for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. All right, we are now safe to discuss this movie. First thoughts, just what did you think coming out of the theater? I mean, I know what you messaged me, and we're not going to repeat it. But
oh my gosh,
what did you think coming out of the theater?
It's so fun, and the thing that I'll say is like I knew that this was. I think the titling has changed because I think the next one's Beyond the Spider-Verse, but it was supposed to be like a part 1, part 2. So I knew that this was and I could tell by the pacing of the film that this was going to end in a place that wasn't a full conclusion. So I was wondering when that was, and then it just kept going. But it wasn't like, come on, I gotta get out of here. It was just like, oh, we're getting more. But I was just kind of blown away by the art of this movie, the surprises, and the style of it, not just even in the art style, but in it felt really bold the way that some of these action sequences play out, to where the lines are just coming so quickly. It's not dumbed down for a kids movie. It's just
Mhm.
it's very comic book like. It even has like the little like notes in the corner for some of the
Yeah.
things. And I just thought it was really, really interesting and really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit on so many things that I had thoughts of as I was watching the movie. I mean, first of all, the art of this movie is just I've never been like as I'm watching the movie, I need to buy a book of like the art of this movie. Um, I tweeted actually my response was I just saw Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse and I finally understand art. I was half joking. Because I really like felt an emotional connection to what was just at certain points of the movie, just a visual medium. And it was, just all the stuff with Spider-Gwen and her universe, the scenes between her and her dad. The color was, I mean, just so beautifully done. I mean, I need to, and actually we got a poster as we went and saw it in AMC. They gave us posters, which I'm really excited about. They're gigantic and I need to find a giant frame for them. But so I'm excited to put that up, added that to my office. But I mean, just so blown away by the art. And then you mentioned the comic bookiness of this movie. And I said that in my review too. This is the most comic book of any comic book movie. Like it feels exactly like that same style of storytelling, which is so cool. For it plays to a general audience. Everyone's going to enjoy this, but also those of us who typically read comics every Wednesday are going to attach themselves to it so so much stronger than most other animated movies and superhero movies, because that style is so perfect. And like you said, the words coming up, I have to watch it again because we're going to go through some of the like quick Easter eggs and references and
Oh,
things.
I'm sure there's tons. Like I was thinking, that's what I was thinking. You have to watch it hundreds of times to catch them all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm probably going to be going back to a theater this upcoming week to go see it again. But yeah, so I want to. I mean, you talked about the action too. The action was so seamless and just like it played in a way that it was kind of blending animation and live action. Like it felt like I was actually watching real people because of the way they moved, and the animation was just so flawless. So yeah, lots to love about the overall movie itself. But some of the characters I want to talk about too. I mean, top of the list for me. I mean, yes, obviously this is a Miles Morales movie. He's the main character, but it felt for a lot of it like Gwen Stacy was actually the focus of this film. I talked about the scenes in her universe talking to not to be confused with the people who make your sweatshirt, but the scenes in her universe where she's talking to her dad, and she, for the first 20 minutes or so, she is the main character of this movie.
Yeah, she opens it up, and this is where we talked about when we saw Eternals. I wondered if the sound mix was off. I think that something was probably a little bit weird with the sound of mine.
Yeah,
when in the opening, is it kind of like she's kind of drowned out by her drum playing? Like it's not quite clear.
Yeah, the drum playing, and then there's even just like the score and something like the conversation with her dad. She's kind of drowned out a little bit, and I wonder if that was a choice. I wonder if that was just to kind of play into her story. But that's good to know that wasn't just in my theater, that it was the movie itself.
Yeah, but no, that opening scene, and it kind of harkens back. It makes reference to the structure of the first one, where you had all the different spider people introduce themselves in a set way. But she says, "Let's do it differently this time," and so that kind of set it up nicely. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I think you're right. It's definitely like Miles is still a big part of it, but you don't see him for like the first reel of the movie.
yeah. There's a long stretch, almost like I guess it's not a cold open because this is the sequel and we already have the story of these characters, but like it feels like a cold open with just her and dealing with a situation in her universe. So yeah, that was really interesting. And then I wanted to mention too that, so we used to do Marvel Time. We would talk about comics every Wednesday, and every now and then you would fill in. And one of them was for a Ghost Spider comic. And you said then, like, I love the color scheme and the art style around this character, and that translated from the comic into this movie so well. That
especially
like,
that later scene that we'll talk about, but just
yeah,
like the watercolor inspiration and those like vibrant colors.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a beautiful movie, and I don't think I've ever used that term in more of a true sense than like the way it works for this film. Another character I want to talk about, by the way, is the Spot, the sort of villain of this movie. I mean, it was interesting because I think everybody went into this like, yeah, we know the Spot's a part of it, but everyone was kind of thinking, yes, Spider-Man 2099 is the one we see in the trailer pulling all the strings and you know, at odds with Miles. The Spot has a bigger role than I expected, and I think
he's not a villain of the week.
No, he's not a villain of the week, which he very much is in the comics. Like, he is even to the point where he is in a group of villains called the Legion of Losers. So he is a joke in the comics for the most part. There's a few stories here and there, but this, to me, I think was by far the best story that's been written in any medium for this character. So I was really happy to see, and I thought, like, again, beautifully used. Like, the fight scenes between him and Miles, while are comical because he is sort of at the time the villain of the week, I think they were really well done, and like that power set was used to its full potential.
Yeah, you're like, how is he? Yeah, he might not be that powerful, but at the same time, like, how do you actually go about catching him? Because
right,
it feels like he can just keep slipping away. So you're like, oh, this is already an interesting challenge for a character that on the surface does seem kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, and very comparable to Doobie's favorite Doorman. So a favorite of this podcast.
With the voice of Gideon Graves.
Yeah, Jason Schwartzman, I thought, did a really, really great job, and good casting there, because you wanted this character to be a little bit, to be comical, but also I think he did a great job of becoming the more menacing character as it went on. So, and I mean, the casting of this whole movie is just fantastic, because, you know, as the next character we'll talk about is Spider-Man 2099, and Oscar Isaac just doesn't miss. You know, obviously very familiar with the Marvel universe. You know what? I take it back. He does miss with Apocalypse. So aside from Apocalypse, he's great in the Marvel universe. Great here again. Like, you connect with Spider-Man 2099. You get a little bit of his story, and there's like this emotional attachment. But then he's also just such a bad guy, we'll say, in a ways like you immediately hate him. So I thought they did a great job with that character, and Oscar Isaac knocks it out of the park again. All right, I have a list here of just little gags and Easter eggs, and so we'll spend more time on some of them than others, but we're just going to run through some of these real quick. There's a billboard in the back. I can't even tell you exactly which scene, but there are so many gags like this throughout this movie. Did you catch the billboard for soda and then their tagline, "A generic brand"?
No.
So things like that are just hidden all over the movie. I forget even which universe they're in at the time, but just in the background, soda, a generic brand. And then one of the actually like spoken lines that I wanted to mention that really made me laugh, and I don't think most of the people in the theater noticed it, but Gwen is explaining Spider-Man 2099 to Miles and calls him, like, he says he's kind of like has a vampire quality to him. And Miles says, "A vampire good guy? I would pay good money to see that." That has to be poking fun at Morbius, a Sony Marvel movie. I mean, that was just, to me, such a great gag to throw in there so quickly. Loved that. Did you have any others like that? Any other little quick ones that?
No, I think mine were bigger.
Yeah. Sure. All right. So let's talk about some of the bigger ones. I mean, first off, the Spot jumps around. He learns he can jump around different universes and jumps into a live action universe, which really threw me off because I did not expect that. And jumps into a convenience store where he meets Mrs. Chen. So those of you who have seen Venom will remember Mrs. Chen. So that was really funny. And that was, to me, the first one where I was like, oh, they're just breaking the rules here. Like, you're not allowed to do this in a movie. I mean, there's like Space Jam, but that's not taken as seriously. This is an animated character going out into the real world and interacting with real life characters in ways that I did not expect to see, in ways that make me think they could connect these universes and it would work out. So I'd be really interested to see where this goes in the future. And I mean, I guess we'll just parlay that into the really big one, which is, I mean, I know you're a big fan. You want to throw this one out there?
So we see they talk about the Prowler. They're going through like a museum of all these like different characters, and there's a Prowler who is a live action Donald Glover who, first of all, helped inspire the character of Miles Morales because he wanted to play Peter Parker in a live action Spider-Man. And as legend has it, the comic book creator thought about that. And it's like, oh yeah, there should be like a black Spider-Man. So came up with Miles. But in Homecoming, he plays, is it Aaron Davis? Is that
Aaron
he
Davis.
plays Aaron Davis and even says like, oh, you know, I got a nephew who lives in this neighborhood. So he is basically Miles's uncle in that. And so to see him as the Prowler, you're like, oh, you picked up that one little bit in Homecoming. It basically connects the MCU and this because he is that character, but in a progressed form.
Yeah. I mean, that's to me like just broke all of the rules. Like you're interacting with a live action character from a universe that is partially from a different studio set in a completely different universe. And you're progressing that character's story. You're not allowed to do these things, and yet they just go ahead and do it. It's also our first look at a live-action Prowler suit. We've never seen the Prowler in live action before. It looked awesome. I can't wait to see it again in more detail. But just everything about this. And this was, I think, probably the biggest reaction in my theater, which, by the way, I will say my theater had some pretty good reactions to this movie. So that was a lot of fun.
That's not at Alamo, so it's usually a little bit more reserved. But I was very excited. I also want to talk about some other like parallels to the MCU, but I do want to mention one of the funniest things for me was we have the character like when we first get to Miles as part of the movie, you have a character who's like a guidance counselor or something at the school.
Oh yeah,
and I see her and I'm like, wow, that looks like an animated version of Rachel Dratch.
Right.
And so apparently my wife was thinking the exact same thing because as soon as she started speaking, we just looked at each other and went, So that was fun. But I thought it was interesting. So first of all, they've explicitly mentioned the MCU in this movie where he says, oh, don't get me started on Doctor Strange and that nerd from Earth 199. But then there's also like, if you think about the watches, I'm like, okay, so they're all kind of like America Chavez.
Sure. Yeah.
Being able to jump through these different realities. You kind of have the thing where you're thrown from one reality to another. And then the big one for me is when Spider-Man 2099 is explaining how like all these different universes. Yeah. It starts with like a branch and you're like, oh my God, it's the prime timeline. Like it was seriously like they took it in a different direction after that. But the way it starts, I was like, oh my gosh, is this really about to like cross over with Loki right now?
Right. And in that moment in the movie, I think that we had already seen Donald Glover, right? So I would just like, I don't even know anymore. Like Tom Hiddleston could walk out into this movie and I would just be like, yeah, that makes sense now. I going into it, never would have thought that, but they are just making their own rules. So I would love to see more collaboration between Marvel Studios and Sony so that things like that can happen. I totally get Kevin Feige's sort of wariness with movies like Morbius, but kind of would be really cool to see some more freedom on that front. Lots of other spider characters, obviously, thrown throughout. I mean, a lot of them original designs and some really, really cool ones, but a lot of them also taken right from comics or animated series and things like that. One I want to talk about is the video game Spider-Man. I mentioned, we talked about the gameplay footage. They straight up, they mentioned two characters. I forget who they were talking about specifically at the time, but they're like, oh, he's like a video game thing. And then the Spider-Man from Marvel Spider-Man, the PlayStation game, is there. And he's like, are you talking about me? So yeah, I love the way that they threw that in there. We had the 60s Spider-Man swing by and he had a really funny gag. The one I was missing, I don't think, maybe he was in there, but I didn't really get a big spot, was the 90s Spider-Man. I wish he had a bigger role, if any. But Spectacular Spider-Man, I know that's a really popular animated series, came in and had a line, really got the spotlight for a few seconds. There was even, and I actually didn't notice this as I was watching the movie, but I've seen on Twitter since, the Spider-Man popsicle was chasing Miles Morales through the Spider-Verse. So
Oh, that's funny.
yeah, so they even made a joke about it in the first in Into the Spider-Verse, and now it returns as a spider character apparently. So again on second viewing, I'm gonna have to look for way more of these Easter eggs because there's just so much. There is a character. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, there was another Easter egg that I thought, I don't know if you could call it Easter egg because it's pretty blatant. Miles mentions that he guest hosted Jeopardy, which is funny because they did have that parade of guest stars, but also Jeopardy is produced by Sony. So my stupid conglomerate brain is like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Nice. Yeah, that was a funny. There's a lot of jokes in this movie that that are slipping my mind because there was just so much. And this is a 2.5-hour movie too, so there's a lot to it. But one other Spider character that gets a bigger role than I would have expected was Ben Reilly, this Scarlet Spider, voiced obviously by Andy Samberg. As soon as he starts talking, you're like, that's Andy Samberg. He's fantastic. Ben Reilly is a major character in the comics and has a really great story. So I love that they included him. Great look for a character too. Yeah, definitely is a lot of the time. So I would love to see more.
I've only heard about Ben Reilly from hearing you and Ben talk a little bit about it because it was a recent storyline where Ben Reilly was Spider-Man, like Peter Parker was gone or something.
Yeah, Ben Reilly is a clone of Peter Parker and kind of learns that all of his memories were implanted and then his whole life breaks down. And it's a really dark, twisted story, but a great character. And they did an awesome job with him in this movie. I think that's all of the Spider characters.
There was a Lego Spider-Man.
Oh, Lego! How did I forget him? Lego Spider-Man was great. There was a whole, which makes sense. I mean, it's Sony, it's Lord and Miller, it's the Lego movie. So you get into the Lego universe. Also, Peter Parked Car. Loved that one. Another a car version of Spider-Man. Just so many great characters thrown in there. I want to talk too about the soundtrack because the soundtrack for Into the Spider-Verse was instantly like a classic. Like everyone just loved it. I really liked the soundtrack here too. It doesn't seem as memorable as the first one. And unfortunately I went and I did listen to it. It is great. I really enjoyed it. But if you listen to it, at least on Apple Music, everything has like clips of the movie like spliced into the song. So it doesn't quite play as well. So maybe I'll have to find a different version of it in some way. But the score was also fantastic. So I thought they did a really great job with the music. That matches the art in this movie. And then you mentioned it quickly at the top, but let's talk about that cliffhanger ending. So Miles, which by the way, did you catch that Miles was going back to the wrong universe?
I didn't catch he was going back to the wrong universe, but when he got there, I noticed that the art was different. And so I kind of predicted that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they mentioned that the spider that bit Miles was from Earth 42, and then as the go home machine, as it's aptly called, was like programming. You see Earth 42 come up on the screen, and so then it sends him home. But I saw that and I was like, oh, he's going to the wrong universe. This is going to end poorly. And then as he gets in there and he has this whole conversation with his mom, I was like, I forgot it. I just totally forgot. Like that's how good their storytelling is they just make you. They engross you in what's going on as opposed to what from, previous scenes even. So he goes to the wrong universe. He meets his uncle, who, of course, died in Into the Spider-Verse, Aaron Davis. And so, he figures out he's in the wrong universe. Everything is thrown off here. And he gets jumped by the Prowler. And we don't entirely know what's going on because his uncle is there with him. And then you see him tied up and the Prowler approaches him and reveals it's Miles. It's that universe's Miles Morales. Just awesome because there's so many stories getting pulled into this one amazing story. My brain was just racing in this, like in the moments leading up to the Prowler reveal, because Hobie Brown, who by the way is Spider-Punk in this movie, wildly popular character already. People absolutely love him. Daniel Kaluuya voices him and does an amazing job. But Hobie Brown in Earth 616 is the Prowler. So I was like, okay, well, maybe our Hobie turns out to be a bad guy and he set Miles up. Maybe this is going a different direction. It's not the Prowler, and it is a recent comic story, Salim, who was a clone of Miles. And there's so many different stories that could have come together. And then I think they absolutely nailed it, creating an original one by having Miles be the Prowler. So, absolutely crushed it. What did you think? Sorry, I'm rambling about this whole bit here. But.
No, I thought it was interesting. Like I said, I didn't know where it was gonna cut off, so I got more than I expected. I liked that idea. I thought it was a good reveal. And I guess we can also back up. I know everyone who's watching this should have already seen the movie, but basically we find out that Miles wasn't supposed to be Spider-Man. Like that was an act. You telling me they don't treat Miles Morales like the Glitch? He's Vanellope Von Schweet of the Spider-Verse. So that's why he wasn't invited to where every other spider person in the universe is there, and that's why he's not a part of it. He's a problem. He's non-canonical, basically, which I thought was a really interesting story point. Like I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, no, me neither. And again, it's amazing because they pull from so many different comic stories, but yet they're creating their own original one, and it's keeping everyone on their toes, comic fans included. So I absolutely love that. And then the other side of this story is Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider Gwen Stacy is going to rescue Miles, and she goes back to his universe and then realizes he's been taken to a different one. So she assembles her own spider team, including the characters from the first film, which I was very curious because we do get Penny Parker earlier and we hear her voice, but Nicolas Cage and John Mulaney's characters do not appear until this moment. We still don't hear their voices. I'm curious if they are returning to play them in Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, but I guess we'll have to find out. There's definitely ways they could work around that where they wouldn't need them to return necessarily.
I think they would.
I would think so too. I mean, money solves a lot of problems, but I'd be excited to see all of that cast return. Love this spider team they've put together with Spider-Punk and then all the characters from the first film as well.
Can we talk about we alluded to it earlier, but the scene when Spider-Gwen goes back to her universe and talks to her dad, and just the art of that, where the colors are constantly changing, getting more vibrant and darker as the conversation goes bad. And then as it clears, just the way that it reminded me of my Apple Card, actually. When you make purchases, it gets different colors. Then when you pay it off, it turns all white. That's kind of like what this was.
I can't speak to the Apple Card, but that scene, that is in particular what I have in mind. Like I want just a big blown up shot of Gwen and her dad and the watercolor, like pink blue background. Because you're right, like it does, like it gets very dark as the conversation is very sort of somber between the two of them, and then the love kind of pours back into the conversation, and the color comes back into the background, and it's beautiful. That's the only word I can describe it. It's a beautiful movie.
So with that scene, though, part of it is that her dad decides to resign, so he's no longer a police chief,
right?
Which, as we learn, every spider person has something in their canon where a police chief that they knew or were close with dies. And that's why Miles rushes home to try to stop his dad from being named a police chief. So do you obviously Stacy or Gwen Stacy is in running afoul of the Spider League or whatever they're called, because she's been helping Miles. Do you think that this plot point also will cause more issues for 2099's goals?
Yes, I think definitely for 2099's goals. What I'm curious about is how much truth is there to this whole theory, how much of this needs to happen the way that 2099 describes, and how much of it is him pulling the strings. There's also definitely something more to this character. I don't think he is necessarily the Miguel O'Hara that, is the main Spider-Man from those comics. I think there's this, again, that vampire aspect to him. I think there's something else going on with him. So it'll be really interesting to see that character's role in the third film. And who is the big bad? Is it the Spot or is it Spider-Man 2099? It'll be interesting.
I think it's going to be The Rock because he needs to be in every sequel.
So yeah, we end with that cliffhanger ending, sort of very Empire Strikes Back, right? Like the good guys are sort of, or the good guy is caught and the hero team is going to rescue him, except Miles seems to have a trick up his sleeve. You see him kind of placing his finger and charging up on one of the chains that he's wrapped in. So it seems like there's a little bit of a positive spin at the end. So, I mean, to me, that ending, by the way, I got the feeling, you can feel that they're ramping up towards the ending, but I was thinking like, there's no way, like we have to have another 45 minutes left in this movie. Like that's how I was so just engrossed in it. And it was so good. I never felt like this movie is running long. There's a lot, there's too much going on here. So it's long, it's 2.5 hours, but I still felt like it could have been longer. But still love the ending. And I mean, now we just have to wait a year for at least a year, I guess, for the third film, Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Disappointed by the lack of an actual mid or end credit scene, though. Just the return.
Yeah. Which I do like the verbiage of that. The Marvel Studios, the way that they've been doing it. But so I like that they played off of that a little bit. But
I also really liked the Mumbai set version of New York, and that Spider Person was very cool. I also, of course, like Spider-Punk's attitude and stuff. Little hard to understand sometimes would be my only note.
Definitely. Yes.
but yeah, I thought he was very funny.
Yeah, loved the new characters, and then just the tease of the return of the old characters. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up our conversation about Spider-Verse there. So I'm going to go ahead and take the banner off. Let me actually get our guest ready too. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the banner. And then are you ready to get into our games?
I think so.
All right. How much is that cameo? That still gets me. I made it, and it's still just the fact that it's Puppet. What was it? Puppet Tom Holland.
Tom Holland, yeah.
I wanted to say Puppet Peter Parker for alliteration.
I guess I can take off my hood now since we are done with the Spider-Verse talk.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, we're just waiting on our guest here, but we are going to be playing How Much Is That Cameo? And our guest is, I think, on for the third or fourth time now. So a veteran, a friend of the podcast, of course. Who's the Boss host, Mike Celestino. Hey, Mike.
Hello. Oh man, my hair is really crazy today.
Mike, we are going to be starting off with How Much Is That Cameo here? So you remember how this game is played?
Yes,
right?
I played this game before.
Yes. Kyle, who do we have this week?
Well, let me play you this person's intro.
Well, howdy, y'all. This here is Rogue of the X-Men. That's right, Lenore Zan, and I'm coming to you today from Halifax, Nova Scotia, to say how excited I am to be here on Cameo. Looking forward to connecting with y'all with personalized videos and chats. So hit me up, folks. I'm ready, sugar.
Of course, you had to say sugar. Yeah, so I figured since we're talking about an animated movie, I might as well talk about an animated series. So that is Lenore Zan. She is Rogue in the X-Men show from the 90s and will be back in X-Men 97. And I saw her at C2E2. But today, my question for y'all is, how much is that cameo?
I like that you threw a y'all in there to go along with that. Now, you've been throwing curveballs at us lately and having us guess like the business.
This is her. She doesn't do business ones. This is just a personal one.
Okay, so we can go back to the Lohan scale and go off of that. I'll start us off here. I think this is going to be relatively low, but I've been very, very wrong in the past. So I'm going to say $40.
Okay.
Do I go now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Michael.
The number that came to my head was 65.
All right. And today's winner is Michael Celestino, because that cameo is $75.
Wow.
All right. I mean, I wonder if that's gone up with the X-Men 97
I think so I haven't seen her in previous searches, so she might have just recently joined Cameo with the hype, and I assume that they're doing a bit of a Comic-Con tour. Like I said, she and most of the X-Men animated series cast were at C2E2 together, so I would not be surprised if they were doing that at several other shows around the country, and probably both countries because they're all Canadian.
Yeah. I will say I'm very excited for X-Men 97. All right. Are you guys ready to draft?
Ready.
What if I told you we were putting a team together? Assemble.
All right. So we are going to be drafting with our conversation about Across the Spider-Verse today. Don't worry, Mike. We won't have any more spoilers.
Okay.
On this episode.
We look scared.
No, you know what? I have three solid choices, but I'm really worried that you guys are going to take them and then I'll have nothing. And I also don't have a fourth. I'm like still going through the list of like potentials here.
Luckily, there's plenty to choose from. Some of them are not so great, but you have plenty of options.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be drafting the best sequels, but only the number 2 in the series. Things like Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Captain America Civil War, those are off the board. We can only draft number 2 in the series, the Empire Strikes Back, if you will, which I guess is technically number 5, but whatever. So, Mike, you know how these drafts work. It's going to be snake. If you draft first in the first round, you're third in the second, and so forth. Where do you want to pick?
I'll go first. Because I'm really scared you guys are going to take.
Probably a good call if you only have a list of 3 in front of you. Kyle, I think that puts you second then, and I picked third.
Okay.
All right. So Mike chose to pick first. What was the first one on your list?
It's actually not the first one that I thought of, but the more I went through the list, I was like, okay, this is probably the strongest of all the number 2s. To me, X-Men to X-Men United, or X2 as it's called.
Yeah, it's on my list for sure. I do really like that one. It's easily my favorite of at least the original franchise. I do like some of the newer casts. But yeah, X2 was a good one. And one that we did with our X crew on Laughing Face Movie Club back when that was a thing. All right, so X2, X-Men United. That sets me up to mention, because I didn't mention it before we started the draft. This isn't just MCU. This is all Marvel movies. So we have a lot of doors open there. Kyle, you are now up with, to me, what unexpected pick first off the board. So now you have a lot of options here. What are you going with?
Well, I can't take Civil War, so I'm going to take Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I thought you might. That was definitely at the top of my list for sure. And I think still, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but to me, it's the best movie of the MCU still, even with things like Avengers Endgame and those big giant spectacles. I thought on its own, The Winter Soldier is just the best movie Marvel Studios has made.
I like it a lot, but I do like Civil War and a little bit more spectacle. But I also appreciate how as Secret Invasion's coming up, lots of talk about comparing that to Winter Soldier in terms of the espionage angle of it. So that sounds like fun.
Yeah, definitely excited about that. And we will be back soon to talk about that show at length. But all right, so my favorite is off the board, my number 1, and then another one off my list, X2. So this is interesting. I guess the whole purpose of this draft is to see where it would fall. And I'm going to go ahead and take it here. I'm going to take Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I think it belongs in sort of this tier of, going this high in the draft. So
I probably would have if I didn't get Winter Soldier, that was probably going to be my pick.
Okay. And I kind of expected you to take Across the Spider-Verse there. I thought that's the way you were going to be going. But now it's interesting because there's a lot of Spider-Man movies to pick from. There's a lot of really good ones, but I think I'm going to go in a different direction, having already got Across the Spider-Verse. And look, some people say it's one of the greatest Marvel movies of all time. I'm going to take Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
I wondered if you would, since I heard that you thought it was one of the best, Marvel's best.
It was. I mean, there are better Marvel movies for sure, but that movie was it. I thought it was a really great movie. I thought it had a lot of great acting, a lot of great story to it, but also had that crazy spectacle that a lot of Marvel fans want. That, you know, throwing in spoiler alert for Multiverse of Madness at this point, but Reed Richards and Black Bolt and Charles Xavier, and just throwing those characters out there was just so crazy. And, you know, like I said about another movie, breaking the rules a lot. So really, really cool. Love that movie. So Across the Spider-Verse and Multiverse of Madness, I've got a multiverse thing going on with my team so far. But Kyle, we're back to you. You've got the Winter Soldier. What's next?
Well, I think I do need a Spider-Man on my team. So I'm going to go to the Tobey Maguire ones.
Okay.
Spider-Man 2.
This is honestly why I didn't go with a Spider-Man movie here, because I wasn't sure which one I like more, to be honest. Spider-Man 2 is great and considered one of the greatest superhero movies, not even Marvel movies, just superhero movies of all time. So definitely a strong pick and probably going to win you some votes. But Mike, we are back to you now. You've got X2, X-Men United.
So one of the other two locks for me was Multiverse of Madness. So that's off the table for me. So I'm going to go with my third choice here is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
That probably would have been my next pick.
Yeah, it was high on my list as well. I was very curious to see how high it would go. I do think, to me, I think it's third in terms of those three movies in that trilogy. But I mean, they're all so close. They're all so good. They're so funny too. So I think it's a strong choice there. And then we're back to you to kick off the third round now, Mike.
Now I'm terrified. Now I'm like looking at the list. I'm like, what the heck else is there? I am going to say, I'm gonna pick. I'll go with Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Okay, yeah, it was on my list. Yeah, I do like that one. I think it was better than Quantumania, so I think it was a solid choice there, and fit in really well. Like, you know, it came off of Infinity War, and that's like really intense, emotional scene, and then you just go into this crazy fun movie. So it came out at a good time too. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, solid pick. Kyle, back to you now. What's your third pick going to be?
This must be in a weird position because earlier today, I confessed that I haven't actually seen this movie, but in the grand tradition of stealing Mac's picks, I'm taking Deadpool 2.
yeah, that was the next one on my list.
I also have not seen that film.
We talked about the news of some of the casting for Deadpool 3 and how pretty much the entire cast is coming back. And Deadpool 2 was just fantastic. Both of you should watch that movie as soon as you possibly can.
Now you can take the one that I probably would have taken if I wasn't just being I don't have a word that.
Now I'm not sure, because I guess the other Spider-Man movie I considered is still there. Oh man, there's still a few that I really like, and I'm not sure which ones I want to go with. I am going to go.
Betty has seen Deadpool 2. Now everything's topsy-turvy.
I also wanted to point out, actually, too, all in the games comment. Actually, he liked No Way Home, but prefers Homecoming in that trilogy. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take the only one in that trilogy that you did not mention. I'm going to take Spider-Man Far From Home.
The only one that's eligible in this draft as well, to be fair, but yes.
Sure, yes. At the time, I thought it might have been the best Spider-Man movie that has been made. Multiple movies have come out since then that have made me rethink that, clearly, as evidenced by this draft. But really, really liked Far From Home. I love the way that they handled Mysterio, who I never thought was a good character to transition into film, to be honest. But I think they really handled that well. Now I'm put in a tough spot because I have a few left on my list, and this is my last pick. So I've got Across the Spider-Verse, I've got Multiverse of Madness, and I've got Far From Home. I guess I'm just going to stick to my list here. I'm between two of them, but I'm going to go with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't the most fun movie, but it was incredibly well written, incredibly emotional, very well acted. So yeah, Wakanda Forever. That's going to be my fourth and final pick. Kyle, we're back to you.
Okay. Now I gotta do some thinking. Let's see here. With that off the board, that's off the board. Yeah, I have a feeling that whatever I pick is not going to be popular.
Venom 2 is available.
Whew, that's a good point. I do have that. Let me look at my DVD case. See if I'm missing any. I feel like I'm going to like completely overlook something actually good, and you guys are gonna laugh at me.
I only have 2 more on my list, to be honest. And then
I only have 2 more on my list.
Yeah, I felt like after that last one on my list, it was kind of getting into some weaker films. So
I'll go with the one that I personally like more. I'm going to take Age of Ultron.
Yeah, that was the next one on my list. I like that movie, I think, more than it's given credit for. I think
so too.
I get the idea that people didn't like Ultron and his humor and stuff like that, but I mean, that's kind of what you got from the MCU, right? So I think they did a decent job with it, and it introduced Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Vision, so it was a big key part. And Mike, have I stalled long enough for you to come up with a fourth pick?
I'm ready to go.
All right, so Mike,
here's where
here.
I have a choice here to make. And I feel like I could go the easier. I could pick the easier of the two that will get me mocked less by people who are exposed to my list. But I first of all, I want to say I don't dislike Iron Man 2. I enjoyed it the last time I watched it. I like a lot about it. So I know it gets a bad rap, but if I were going to play it safe, I'd pick Iron Man 2. What I'm going to go with is not a good movie, but I like it for what it is. It's got the only live action depiction of the Silver Surfer, played by Doug Jones, with voiced by Lawrence Fishburne. I don't like what they did with Galactus, but you know what? I had a fun enough time with it. Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer.
I thought about that for the same reason. It's like, it's Silver Surfer. Who cares if it's good or not?
Yeah. No, and we talked about the first Fantastic Four movie on Movie Club a while back, and I still really liked the casting of that Fantastic Four. So I think they did a pretty good job with that. I mean, you're right. It's not a good movie. And I will say Iron Man 2 was the only one left on my list. I think you're right. That was the safer pick, but you might get some respect out of the Fantastic Four pick, because I thought about it too. I almost put that on my list. I think for me, it's the Galactus cloud that kept me from allowing myself.
Same here.
All right, so I'll run through our teams real quick. Mike got X2, X-Men United, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Fantastic Four 2, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Kyle got Captain America, the Winter Soldier, Spider-Man 2, Deadpool 2, and Avengers Age of Ultron. And then I got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This is going to be a tight vote, I think. Honestly, Kyle grabbing an Avengers movie in the fourth round is probably a steal. So we'll see how that impacts things. But I think this is going to be pretty close. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us for this, this craziness. What do you got going on? What's up with Who's the Boss lately?
Last week, I had an interview with a Marvel Comics writer named Ethan Sachs. He writes the ongoing Star Wars Bounty Hunter comic for Marvel, and I had wanted to talk to him for years, since that comic launched in early 2020. So it was really great to finally nail that interview down. And then this week I'm actually going to be at Walt Disney World in a couple days for a Indiana Jones event. Very excited for that.
Very cool. You're gonna be in my backyard, I guess. So we might have to work something out.
We might have to meet up. Yeah.
That's the kind of wildlife he normally has in his backyard.
Right. No, that's very different. Kyle, what else do we have going on? Like I said before, we talked briefly about Secret Invasion. We're gonna have that pretty soon, June 21st. That's coming up on Disney Plus. So we'll be back to our regular scheduled program here pretty soon. Anything else going on in the meantime that I should be aware of?
For us, I don't think so. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, which we're going to be streaming live to when we do our Secret Invasion talks.
Yeah.
Make sure you subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Every morning we do pretty much every morning, Doobie and I do a show looking at the latest news and some other frivolity. And then Mike's also been, for the most part, streaming his Who's the Boss live. So be sure to check out everything we have here on the channel.
Oh yeah, new Who's the Boss tomorrow at 1 p.m. with Alex Reif. We're going to be talking about the animated series Young Jedi Adventures.
Oh, cool. I haven't checked that out.
With a cute blue thing.
Yeah. Nubs.
Very fun. So yeah, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Zzzax of Life Pod so you can vote for who you think won this draft. Thor: The Dark World, I don't think was close to being picked by anyone, which stinks because like Thor Ragnarok is so good, but we couldn't take that one. Again, be sure to follow us at Zzzax of Life Pod on Twitter. Check out laughingplace.com for all your latest Marvel and Disney news in general. And I think that's it. So we will be back in about 3 weeks for Marvel's Secret Invasion. So thanks again, Mike, for joining us.
Sure.
And thanks everyone for watching. Bye.
Bye.